Nobody outsprints Tim Merlier right now. Nobody. Not Philipsen. Not Girmay. Not Kooij. Nobody in this peloton. And what he did in Bergerac today, coming from 12th position with 200 metres to go, closing a gap that should have been impossible, and winning a Tour de France stage for the second consecutive day, is the kind of performance that forces you to stop and ask a question about this entire race that nobody is comfortable answering. Is Tim Merlier the most dominant rider at the 2026 Tour de France right now? Not Pogačar. Merlier. Stay with me on that for 30 seconds because the answer tells you something about what this tour actually is when you zoom out past the GC storyline. Stage 8. 180.4 kilometers from Périgueux to Bergerac through the Dordogne Valley in temperatures that forced the organisers to shorten tomorrow's Stage 9 under a red alert heatwave warning. 40 degrees on the road. Riders consuming more water in a single stage than most people drink in a week. The kind of heat that does not just make cycling uncomfortable, but genuinely dangerous. The kind where the difference between finishing and abandoning can come down to a single moment of poor hydration management on a climb that is only 3 kilometers long, but sitting in direct sun at the worst possible time of day. And through all of it, Pogačar sat in the bunch, conserved every possible joule of energy, finished safely in the peloton, and went to bed tonight with the yellow jersey still on his shoulders and 2 minutes and 42 seconds still between him and the only man who has beaten him at this race before. That number has not moved in 2 days. And the reason it has not moved is the most interesting tactical story of this entire week. And I want to explain it to you clearly because it connects directly to what happens when this race hits the Vosges and then the Alps. But first, back to Merlier, because what happened in Bergerac deserves its own moment before we get into GC chess. Coming into the final bend, Merlier was buried in approximately 12th position. Mathieu van der Poel had delivered Jasper Philipsen in textbook fashion. Exactly where every led-out man in professional cycling dreams of placing their sprinter, positioned, sheltered, with clear road ahead and the right amount of speed. Max Canter was right there. Kooij was tucked in behind. The sprint looked set before it had even started, and every rider who has watched Van der Poel work a lead-out at this race for the last 3 years was already calculating who finishes second. Then Merlier went. Not from a perfect position, not from the wheel of a lead-out man. From 12th place, in a gap that opened for approximately 2 seconds before the riders around him closed it again, Merlier produced an acceleration that is genuinely difficult to describe without sounding like exaggeration. He went past Canter. He went past Kooij. He went past Philipsen, who had just received the best lead out in the race and was already committed to his sprint. And he crossed the line with enough margin that Girmay, who followed his wheel all the way and produced a sprint that would have won almost any other day at this tour, finished half a bike length back and said afterward that he did not know if he would have won even with cleaner positioning. That is dominance. That is a sprinter who is operating at a level that the rest of the field can see clearly and is currently unable to do anything about. Now here is where it gets interesting, because there was a moment in that final sprint that is not getting nearly enough attention and that I think matters for how the rest of the race plays out on sprint stages. Girmay and Wærenskjöld came into the final corner fighting for position, and the helicopter footage showed Girmay leaning into the Norwegian hard enough to force him wide and force him to brake to avoid going into the barriers. Wærenskjöld was furious afterward and did not hide it. He said Girmay pushed like crazy, that it was desperate riding, that it was behaviour that goes too far. He said Girmay rode like a complete idiot and did not deserve to get past him. Those are not diplomatic words from a rider who is trying to manage his public image. That is genuine anger from someone who believes he was cheated out of a legitimate finish position. The UCI commissaires issued a warning to Girmay. They also issued a warning to Kooij for a separate intimidation incident in the same sprint. Neither was relegated. Neither lost their placing. And Thor Hushovd, Wærenskjöld's own team manager and a former sprinter who knows exactly what happens in a 200-metre bunch sprint at the Tour de France, looked at the footage and said it is part of racing. I think Hushovd is right, and I think Wærenskjöld is also right. Both things are true simultaneously. What happened at that corner was within the historical tolerance of professional sprint racing, where contact and intimidation have always existed and always will. And what happened to Wærenskjöld was genuinely unfair in the specific sense that a rider who was positioned to finish second was pushed out of that position by someone who should not have been there in the first place. The sport contains both of those realities and has never fully resolved the tension between them. What matters for the race going forward is this: Wærenskjöld is angry. Hushovd said that anger is a good sign because it means the rider is switched on. A rider who is switched on and angry at the Tour de France is a rider who will be extremely motivated the next time a sprint stage arrives. File that away. Now let me talk about the thing that actually defines Stage 8 and that connects everything else happening in this race to the next 2 weeks. Pogačar said after the stage that an agreement has been reached among the GC favourites to sit at the back of the peloton on sprint stages and stay safe. Not an official agreement. Not something signed in a team managers meeting. An informal understanding between rivals who are all simultaneously competing for the same yellow jersey and trying to survive the same 40-degree heat on the same dangerous roads. Pogačar, Vingegaard, Del Toro, Evenepoel, Ceysas, all of them sitting near the back of the bunch today, letting the sprint teams do their work at the front and arriving in Bergerac on the same time as each other and 3 minutes ahead of nobody. That kind of gentleman's agreement sounds simple. It is not simple. It requires every team involved to trust that the other teams are honouring it in real time, at racing speed, in heat that is already making riders make worse decisions than they would under normal conditions. And it requires each individual rider to override their own competitive instinct and sit in the wheel of someone who is also trying to beat them in the mountains, trusting that today is not the day that changes the race. The fact that it held today tells you something about the collective intelligence operating in this peloton right now. These are not just fast riders. They are smart riders who understand that 3 weeks of racing requires decisions that look passive in the moment and decisive in retrospect. Now the general classification. Unchanged. Pogačar leads. Vingegaard at 2:42. Del Toro at 3:27. Evenepoel at 3:30. Ayuso at 3:34. And tomorrow, Stage 9, the first day of what should be transitional terrain through the Massif Central, has been shortened by 30 kilometers because the French authorities issued a red alert heatwave warning for central France. The organisers made the call to cut the stage and protect the riders. Merlier, who won today, said there is not a lot of other things they can do given the conditions, which is a sprinter graciously accepting a decision that actually reduces his opportunities in a race where he is currently winning every time the road goes flat. And here is the specific thing I want you to hold on to heading into the next 3 stages, because this is the part of the race that will define whether 2:42 becomes 6 minutes or becomes 1 minute by the time the Alps arrive. The Vosges are coming. Stage 10 goes into the Massif Central. Stage 11 enters the Vosges with climbing that will force the GC riders to stop being passengers and start making decisions. And the specific question that Stage 11 poses to Jonas Vingegaard is one he has not answered yet in this tour. Can he make Pogačar feel anything? Because here is the reality of the last 8 stages. Pogačar has attacked twice and won twice. The Tourmalet gap was 2:42. Every other day, Vingegaard has matched him or sat with him in the bunch and lost nothing. That sounds positive for the Dane until you look at the arithmetic and realise that matching someone on flat days and losing 2:42 on the first mountain day produces a deficit that grows with every mountain day that follows if the pattern holds. Vingegaard needs to find a day, one day, where he goes first, where he makes the move instead of responding to it, where Pogačar is the rider calculating whether to follow rather than the rider choosing when to go. He has not done that yet. And every day that passes without that happening is a day that UAE team Emirates spends reinforcing the psychological reality that they are the team setting the terms of this race, not responding to them. Stage 9 tomorrow is shortened, hot, and likely to produce another sprint or a controlled breakaway day. It tells us very little about the mountain war still to come. But stage 10 and 11 start answering the question that this entire race has been building toward since the Tourmalet. What does Jonas Vingegaard do when he has to attack to stay in this Tour de France? The answer to that question is what both videos on your screen right now are about. One of them shows you the last time he found it. Watch that first, then come back for stage 9.